Welcome into another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I'm the Fat Guy. Most people call me Brett Mason. I appreciate you listening to this episode today as we broadcast live from a van down by the river. It's actually really late at night. I was going to do a podcast tomorrow, but I just can't fall asleep tonight. It's as I'm recording this, it's about 2 a.m. I'm in the middle of nowhere in my RV. Have a little fan going. It's a nice, cool evening. Hopefully the fan isn't making too much noise. It's a pretty quiet fan, but we're out in the middle of the woods, so it's quiet and serenity. And I figured, it's a good time to do a podcast. We're going to be talking about the three most powerful tools of weight loss ever: the hammer, the sledgehammer, and the wrecking ball of weight loss. So no matter how difficult of a case you are, there is an answer that will get you insane results. So what do I know about it? Well, I've been fat my whole life, lost about 125 pounds. I got real serious about wanting to lose weight in 2013, and my journey took me from there to here. Started with a pill, a product. Then I started researching things and getting into nutrition and trying to understand what caused weight loss. I knew that it wasn't a willpower thing. I knew that there was something medically different about me. And some of my best friends throughout my life had disputed that and told me it was willpower, and and I just knew that wasn't true. I knew that I had willpower to do anything I wanted to do, and there was something different where food and my body was concerned. So nevertheless, it led me through different things. From I even made it into being a raw food vegan for a while, which was very helpful for me, by the way, and quite delicious, I might add. And I went from raw food to being a cooked food vegan, but it was still whole food, just whole, not any of these vegan, crap products they make, like vegan sausages and stuff. All those, I would have those occasionally. Most of it was just whole, real foods, and lost some weight that way. And continued to learn and study, and through several events that I've covered in previous podcasts that I won't go through again, I arrived at keto, which just changed my world forever. And once I started getting into the research keto, and then I got into the physiological aspects of the body and the metabolism, and then I learned about insulin resistance and all these things, and then I was like, okay, finally I understand it. Now I understand why I got fat. I understand that I was physiologically different than everybody else, that it wasn't a willpower problem, and it was I tell you, it's learning that and finally knowing the answer. It's just been such a life-changing thing for me, and so I've devoted my life to sharing that with other people. That's why I spend so much time recording these podcasts. That's why I spend so much time replying to people's questions and stuff, and there's some days I do that nearly all day. There's some weeks I do that nearly all week. And it brings me some satisfaction. It brings me great satisfaction, actually. And I have a case in point. I received a Facebook message from Charles McNally. What was this? It was April the 27th. So it was a couple days ago. But he said, hey, Brett, I've been doing keto since a week before Easter. And today at my doctor's appointment, I was excited to find out I lost 20 pounds. I just want to say it's all because of you being such an inspiration to me that I started keto. So thanks so much, man. And God, Charles, that makes me so happy that I played some small role in your success. And I'd love to know what your doctor said, and I'm sure your doctor was amazed and probably excited. Hopefully when you told your doctor to use keto, they didn't freak out like some doctors do and go, oh, God, that's a dangerous, eating real food is dangerous. I'm still shocked when doctors have that reaction. What? You're eating real food? That's dangerous. But it's basically all a ketogenic diet is just eating real food. How they always manage to arrive at that's dangerous is just... it's fascinating to me. Nevertheless, I'm not a doctor. I don't have any formal medical training. So nothing I say is intended as medical advice, and it is not specific weight loss advice for you. These are just simply my opinions and my own personal experiences. So I want to make that very clear up front. So let's get into this concept of weight loss and the three tools of weight loss that I've learned which work They work for reasons that make sense, physiological reasons within inside the body. And it's not just some, hooey-fooey, like, oh, you need to exercise more and eat less. If that worked, nobody would be fat. Raise your hand if you're one of the people that's tried that 1,000,000 times, only to feel dejected and miserable because you thought you were a failure, or you had no willpower, or you were lazy, or you were a slob, and it made you depressed. Because that's not the answer. That's, something has gone wrong internally, and you have to eat in a way as to correct it. You have to take steps in a way as to correct it. And, moving more and eating less does not correct it. It has, at best, minor effects on it, and they're usually short-lived effects. So, let's start with the hammer, okay? We're going to work our way from hammer to sledgehammer. So, depending on where you fall on this range of metabolic dysregulation will determine which of these tools or combinations of these tools you will need to use to get your best result for weight loss. And I'm to the point now I even hate addressing it as weight loss. I really like to address it as health, because you're unhealthy on the inside. Something is broken. A body that has worked normally is designed to work normally and efficiently and proficiently has broken down. And so we really want to restore health. The weight loss is just a byproduct. The weight loss is just a byproduct of the restoration of health. And, but we all think in terms of weight loss. But just quickly, before we get into the hammer and the sledgehammer, the wrecking ball, you think about nature, how many animals in nature get overweight, get morbidly obese? It just doesn't happen. Their bodies regulate themselves. Everything works because there's been no interruption. And so when you look at and ask, well, what's been the interruption in the human animal paradigm? And it's pretty quickly food production. The only time animals get fat is when humans intervene and start feeding them. That's when they get fat. You won't find fat dogs in the wild. The only fat dogs you find are in somebody's house where they feed them processed food. You're not going to find fat cats in the wild. It just doesn't happen. The only fat cats you find are cats that lives in somebody's house, and human intervention causes it. Humans have screwed everything up. And we're so many generations into this now, it seems normal rather than abnormal. This food production, and it's really frankenfood. Most of it's not even real food, but this processed food is the problem. Real food is the answer. And months and months and years and decades of bombarding your body with these refined and processed carbohydrates and frankenfoods and highly processed foods and things that just aren't natural, and our body doesn't understand how to process, has wrecked our metabolism. And it's caused insulin resistance, which leads to a chronically elevated weight, which only magnifies and compounds the problem to cause even more elevated weight, which magnifies and compounds the problem that causes even more elevated weight. And once it starts, then it becomes a snowball rolling downhill. And unless you can go back to the source and you can cut off the problem that's causing it, which is persistent and chronically elevated insulin levels, you're just never going to achieve a normal weight again naturally and permanently. It just won't happen. So the first thing you should learn about weight loss before we get into the three tools, which are the hammer, the sledgehammer, and the wrecking ball. The first thing you need to understand is that your goal is to get insulin levels as low as possible for as long as possible. And then you need to understand that depending on how insulin resistant you are, where you are in the level of insulin resistance will determine how big a tool you need to use. So I would say the good news is probably if you're younger and you're early on in the insulin resistance level, you can probably see pretty good results pretty quickly with just chipping away with the hammer. if you're somebody's older, and you could be younger too, it's not age dependent. There's younger people who have really, really severe levels of insulin resistance, okay? But just know that the longer you've been fat, the longer you've been overweight, the longer you've had this problem, probably means the higher level of insulin resistance you have. And so what's the highest level you can have? Well, type 2 diabetes is the highest. If you're a type 2 diabetic, you have the highest level of insulin resistance possible before death. What's the next highest level? Well, pre-diabetic. What's the next highest level? Well, they don't really have a medical term for it, but it's there. It's elevated insulin that they don't catch because they never check your insulin. And I hope this changes. I hope doctors start checking insulin rather than blood sugar. I've talked about this in other podcasts, but I want to mention it briefly. When a doctor checks your blood sugars and he goes, oh, your blood sugars is normal, you're fine. That doesn't tell you anything. That's the stupidest test ever. You can be deeply insulin resistant and have normal blood sugars. So your body is having to crank out 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much insulin as a normal healthy person to achieve that same normal blood sugar. So the blood sugar is normal, but the insulin that your body's having to crank out to maintain that normal blood sugar could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a healthy amount. So why doctors don't test insulin, I don't know. Hope that changes. I'd tell you this, next time you see your doctor, fast for 16 to 24 hours before the visit. When you get there, demand a fasting insulin test and see what your fasting insulin is. That's what you need to know. All right, let's jump into it. So the hammer. This will work, if you have low to moderate or whatever insulin resistance, this will work really well. It'll work for everybody. So don't get me wrong. You'll see some results. Even if you're on the worst end of the insulin resistance scale, you'll see some results, but it may not be complete results. I just listened to an interview with a woman who went keto and lost about 20 pounds, but couldn't lose any more. That was the end of it. She just couldn't lose any more. So she did have success, but it eventually stopped. And it's because she found out later that she had such high levels of insulin resistance, she needed to move on to the Sledgehammer and the wrecking ball, okay? So, step number 1 is a ketogenic diet. So this is cutting the carbs out. You got to get the carbs out. Carbs elevates insulin. We want insulin levels to fall. And so you just eliminate what causes the high insulin, and that's carbs. And so you want to keep your carbs to 20 or less a day. And the lower you can keep them, the better. If you can do 15 carbs a day, that's what you should do. And you can. If you can get by with 10 carbs a day, that's what you should do. You want but it needs to be 20 or less carbs a day, and you want your fat levels to be high. So most of your calories are going to come from fat. So you're going to get a calorie tracking program like MyFitnessPal. Forget how many calories it tells you to eat. Forget all that crap. Forget all the advice it gives you. You just want to look at the numbers yourself. Okay? You want to track your food in MyFitnessPal, and you want to go to the nutrition screen, and you want your carbs to be 20 or less. So on the one screen where it tells you the gram of carbs you've eaten, you want it to be 20 grams or less of carbs. And then if you flip over to a secondary nutrition screen, it'll break down your macros by percentages. You want your fat percentage to be 65 to 70% fat. So if you get those two things right, the protein will kind of take care of itself. If you want to know what your protein levels will be for a woman, you're looking in the 65 to 80 grams a day range. For a man, you're looking in the 75 to 100 gram a day range, okay? Depending on how tall you are. So that's a simplified. I've gone in great detail in many other podcasts about the ketogenic diet and macros and stuff. I'm not getting into the details here, but there's the basics. You can go back to previous podcasts and you can get more details on all of that. Okay, so that's your hammer. And for a lot of people, a hammer will work well. I got some results with the hammer, okay? I started losing weight, and I was losing weight much more quickly than I had lost it on the vegan diet, and I was like, oh, God, this is great. And then I started feeling really good. It kind of slowed off some, though. And that's when I learned about the Sledgehammer. The Sledgehammer is when you combine a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting. Okay? Now, remember at the very beginning of the podcast when I told you that when you're trying to lose weight, your focus should be one thing and one thing only. Don't think it in terms of diet. Don't think in terms of food. Just like, what is my end goal and how can I get to that goal? The goal is to keep insulin levels as low as possible for as long as possible. For some people, it's going to be harder to keep insulin levels low because you're so insulin resistant. I have good news for you, though. Fasting, intermittent fasting, and extended fasting, especially extended fasting, but even intermittent fasting, has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity. So you start getting some of that insulin sensitivity back. You start fixing what was broken. So that's the good news. It is reversible. So what is intermittent fasting? Well, intermittent fasting doesn't mean that you're fasting for 3 days or you're fasting for 5 days or 7 days or anything like that. What it means is that you're spending as many hours of the day fasting as possible, okay? So the most common form of intermittent fasting is called 16-8. So for 16 hours of the day, you don't put anything in your body that will spike insulin. So what can you put in your body? Well, the quick answer is water, okay? What can I do besides water? There isn't a whole heck of a lot left. You can have black coffee, but you don't put any Splenda in it. You don't put any saccharin in it. You don't put any sweet and low in it. You don't put any cream or sugar in it. Just black coffee. Water. Black coffee. That's about it. Unsweetened tea. I happen to like unsweetened tea, so that works out okay for me. I'll tell you this, if you're a sweet tea drinker, well, that's part of your problem. That's why you have a weight problem. So you need to stop drinking it anyway. But secondarily, if you drink unsweetened tea for a while, and if you've been keto for a while and you get that penchant for sugar out of your system, you won't miss it nearly as badly. But unsweetened tea is not bad. So you can do unsweetened tea as well. But I tell people just stick with water, man. Water's what's good. Water's good. Water's healthy. So for 16 hours a day, that's all that really goes into your mouth, okay? There isn't anything else. There's no snacks. There's no, there's none of that crap. Then for 8 hours a day, you're going to eat, and you're going to probably eat twice. So when you first start, you may need to eat 3 times mentally, not physically. Physically, you don't need to eat 3 times, but mentally, you're going to think you do. And, I don't have a problem with that. As long as you understand that your end goal is to move to 2 times, okay? So, first week, you need to eat 3 times during that 8 hours. It's fine. But you need to know when you get around to week 2 that during that 8 hours, you really need to be eating twice. Because again, even though we've picked our 8 hours to eat, if we can eat at the beginning of that 8 hours and then 7 hours go by of not eating, then we get insulin levels dropping again. So even though we're not in the fasting time of day, we're still getting some insulin dropping benefits. And then you eat your dinner. So what does that look like? For most people, it looks like skipping breakfast. If you work third shift or something weird, then it's going to be a little bit different for you, and you'll need to figure that out for yourself. But for quote-unquote normal lifestyle type people, that's waking up, not eating breakfast, and waiting till around lunch. So on the early side of that, it may be 11 in the morning. On the late side, it may be 1. For me, it's usually around 1. And so from then, you've got 8 hours to eat. So, let's just split the middle and say 12, okay? Let's say you first eat at noon. So you have from noon until 8 p.m. to eat. That makes it really simple. Everything you eat is going to happen between noon and between 8 p.m. So let's say you have lunch at noon. And, if you want to drink something that has some sweetness to it, like you wanted it to be a Diet Coke or you wanted it to be unsweet tea that you sweetened with Splenda or something, that would be the time to consume that kind of beverage when you're already eating and spiking insulin anyway. That meal is going to be a keto meal, so it's still keto. We're still keto. We're just adding in intermittent fasting with keto. So we're bringing it up from the hammer level to the sledgehammer level. So you have your lunch and, eat a big lunch. Eat till you're satisfied. And then when you're done, you're back to water again. And that's all you consume until dinner. And you need to be done with dinner by 8. If that means starting to eat at 7:30, that's fine. You need to be wrapping it up at 8. So everything you've eaten has happened within an 8-hour window. And that's the most basic form of intermittent fasting. That's as basic as you can get. And it works really well. And a lot of people I know stick with it and never change. I pushed myself into, I've done it all kinds of ways. I've done 20 and 4. So I don't eat for 20 hours of the day, and I eat 1 or 2 meals in a 4-hour window. So, starting at around 3 o'clock, I may eat for the first time, and then I'm done eating by 7. I have another little meal at 7. So usually what will happen is I'll have like a little bitty meal, like a 300 or 400 calorie meal at like 3. And then at 7, I'll have like 1,000 calorie meal. Big, humongous honking meal, or even 1,200 to 1,300 calorie meal. And it'll be a ketogenic meal. It'll be, very low carb, very high fat ketogenic meal. And I'll be stuffed. I'll just be stuffed, and I'll feel so great that night. I'll feel so satisfied. And then I'll go to sleep that night and wake up the next day and feel great. And I'll make it all the way to 3 in the afternoon or whatever the next day. And then I pushed it even further. Here recently, most all of my intermittent fasting has been on a basically 23 hours. So for 23 hours of the day, I don't eat. And then I just have one big 1,500 calorie meal or 1,200 calorie meal. So it's a big, humongous meal, and I eat it, and I'm stuffed, and I'm satisfied, and it feels amazing, and then I'm done. I don't consume anything that spikes insulin for then 23 more hours until 6 o'clock the next afternoon, or 4 or 5 o'clock the next afternoon, whatever hour I choose to do it. So start on the 16-8. That's very easy. That's very doable, especially if you've been keto. Now, if you're just starting keto, you may want to do keto for a week or two so you get those carbs flushed out. You make it through the keto flu, and you get through all of that, and you start feeling good. Then it'll be much easier for you to fast. If you try to jump right into it, if you jump right into keto and intermittent fasting from day one, it's going to be a little rough for you. Because you're going to be going, it's going to be rough either way. But once you're keto, you don't have the carb cravings, so it makes it easier to do the intermittent fasting. All right, so that's your sledgehammer. And I'd say for 99% of people, that is going to be hugely effective for you. You're going to drop pounds like you wouldn't believe. You're going to have insane success with weight loss, and you're going to feel amazing, and your brain is going to be clear, and you're going to be full of energy, and it's going to be life-changing for you. It's just going to be so life-changing. For some people, though, even that, and that'll work for a while for anybody, I think. But you may reach a point where that quits working again, and you'll know if that, if you make it 3 months or 4 months and you've lost a lot of weight and then it kind of stops, and you've been dead on with your keto, and you've been dead on with the intermittent fasting, and you've been very consistent with it, and then everything's kind of slowing down or stopping, you'll know that you're in the worst level of insulin resistance, and you need to bring out the wrecking ball. And the wrecking ball is moving from intermittent fasting to extended fasting. So instead of fasting for 16 or 18 or 20 hours a day and then eating within a 4-hour, 6-hour, 8-hour window a day, you're going to move to skipping whole days or skipping 2 days. And this is going to allow your insulin to fall, stay down at rock bottom levels, and stay there for 24, 48, 72 hours or whatever. That's the big guns. That is going to be life-changing for you. If you have, been keto and intermittent fasting for months and months and months before you decide you need to try this, I promise you, extended fasting is going to be really easy for you, because you're not going to be a carb addict. You're not going to have sugar withdrawals. You're going to know that you don't freak out when you miss a meal like most people do, like carb eaters. Carb eaters have a meltdown. It always surprises me when carb eaters talk about, people addicted to meth and stuff and how they just need to quit. And meanwhile, you watch them and they just freak the hell out if they think that they're going to miss a meal or not get their glass of sweet tea. They're just as addicted as meth heads are. They're just as bad of addicts. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that in a factual way. Most of America is extremely addicted to sugar. And it's not healthy and it's not funny. It's not something to laugh about. Just because the government has declared processed sugar as food doesn't mean it's actually food. It doesn't mean it's not a drug. It is a drug. You are addicted to a deadly drug that's killing you from the inside out. No different than a meth addict. No different than a crack addict. No different than a cocaine addict. No different than a heroin addict. You're an addict just like they are. The only difference is your addiction is socially acceptable. That's the only difference. The government has declared your addiction acceptable. But you're an addict. I was an addict. I still am an addict. I'm always going to be an addict. I could go back to being a carb addict tomorrow. So easy. Nevertheless, that's the wrecking ball. So what would you do? You would, fast for 48 hours. Then on your third day and fourth day and fifth day or whatever, you go back to the 16 and 8 on those 3 days. You're still going to do intermittent fasting. And so you're going to get the 16 and 8, those 3 or 4 or 5 days or whatever. And then you're going to do another 48 hours extended fasting. And, once a month or once every 6 weeks, you want to stretch that out to 4 or 5 days. You may want to throw a 4-day fast or a 5-day fast in there. That is the wrecking ball. That will get you weight loss and health results like you wouldn't believe. And it's not dangerous. It's not unhealthy. The only people that fasting isn't healthy for the most part, people who are pregnant, women who are nursing, people who are malnourished, people who have body fat percentages of, less than 7 or 8% body fat. People who have that aren't listening to this podcast. If you have 7 or 8% body fat, you are not listening to this podcast about weight loss. You're ripped. And maybe another issue here or there. So, as always, consult with a doctor. But, again, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just laying out there my opinions and my personal experiences. So there you go. I mean, that's how you conquer your weight issues, and that's how you start healing your body from the inside out. That's how you start reversing that insulin resistance. Research has shown, and there's a fair amount of research out there on it now, but there needs to be more, and there's a couple of studies that are outstanding that should be wrapping up. I was reading one yesterday that's underway and should be done in a year. And we'll get some preliminary findings from it in probably a year and a half, but we won't get the full findings from it for like 5 years. But all this research shows that fasting will reverse insulin resistance. In other words, your body will become sensitive to insulin again. You will start restoring your body back to that normal state, just like those animals who haven't had their insulin sensitivity wrecked by Franken foods and processed foods and sugar. Their body understands when they're full and it stops eating. And if they do happen to overeat for whatever reasons, their body handles it and deals with it and moves it on out. But when you have an elevated insulin, your body ain't moving no fat out. It just ain't going to do it. We all have that skinny friend who can eat anything and never gain weight. And the reason for that is, and your skinny friend won't admit it, if they're like my skinny friends. I had some horrible skinny friends that always tell me, I just eat in moderation and I exercise. No, you're gifted. You're metabolically gifted, my friend. You have the ability to eat crap and eat tons of crap whenever you want, or when you mess up on a Saturday or mess up on a Sunday. Your body is so sensitive to insulin that it spikes quickly, it handles the blood sugar, and then it falls really quickly back to a low state, and your body burns all that excess off. And for people like me, and probably like you if you're listening, our body does not work that way. Insulin does not work well for us. It has to go really high, and it has to stay high for a long time to handle the sugar, and then it falls really slowly back down to low levels. And when you're eating 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, it's never fallen to the weight loss level. Even when you're sleeping overnight for the 8 hours, I didn't have enough time for it to fall. So it never falls. So I hope that this podcast has helped you. Please share it. You literally could change them. But this is one of the few things I know that you could do. You could literally change somebody's life. And so share this on your social media, please. Just click the share button. Share it on your Facebook page. Share it on your Twitter, okay? And I never ask for this. Like, I hate asking for things, but I want people to be able to find my podcast, and I want people to be able to get the answers. God, I can't tell you how great it is to finally understand why you're fat. And it's not because you're a slob, and it's not because you don't have willpower, and it's none of these things. It's none of that. It's not your fault. It's such a powerful thing to know that you're different. Your body doesn't work right. After so many years of being told that I didn't have willpower and I was a fat slob and all the other horrible things I was told my whole life, to finally find out that wasn't true. And I knew inside it wasn't true. I can't tell you how many times I told people. I have a friend, well, she's not a friend anymore, but she was my best friend for a while. And we had this deep discussion one day, and I told her, I said, you don't understand. I'm telling you, my body doesn't work like your body does. I watch you. I see how you eat. I see how you live. It's not that much different than how I eat and how I live. Yet you're thin and healthy. And I'm, 150 pounds overweight. How can that be? And she's like, no, I'm very careful. But I watched her. She wasn't that careful, was she? She ate junk like I did. There wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the way we lived our lives. And I knew this. I knew this. And I knew that the old adage about, cutting calories or eating less and moving more, I knew that didn't work because I'd tried it so many times. I knew there was something wrong. So it's so freeing. It frees you from the guilt. It frees you from the shame. It frees you from feeling like a failure. It frees you from the feelings of feeling worthless. It frees you from all that when you understand that there is a medical reason why you're fat and that you can reverse it permanently. So share this. And the thing that I've never asked that I'm going to start asking for is that if you listen to this, in iTunes, please go give it a rating. Go to the podcast and give it a rating. I think you can do that right from the podcast app. I don't know. I wish I could give you step-by-step instructions, but I've rated podcasts before. I don't remember how to do it. You do it from the podcast page. So you go find the podcast, and you can read other reviews, and then you'll see a section to write your own review. Please give us a 5-star rating if you enjoy it, and leave a comment. And because that's how Apple decides who they show the podcast to. Thank you so much. Share. Good luck with your weight loss journey. If I can be of any help to you, let me know. We can conquer this metabolic disease and overcome it and be victorious. I'm living proof. I'm 125-pound living proof that after decades and decades and decades of not having a clue and not being able to be successful, when you find the right answer, you can find success. See you next time.